They sold the girl for 10 cents and a rope, until the buyer froze and said, "That's my dead wife's dress." The trading post crouched against the horizon like a wounded animal, its wooden walls bleached gray by years of sun and wind. Dust hung in the air like prayer, settling on everything with the weight of forgotten dreams. Inside, the smell of leather and tobacco mixed with something else, desperation, thick as molasses and twice as bitter. Samuel Hartwell stood in the doorway, his shadow falling across the worn floorboards. His hat brim cast darkness over his eyes, but it couldn't hide the lines that grief had carved deep into his face. 3 months on the trail had left him lean as winter, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that once carried more hope than sorrow. Behind the counter, old Pete counted coins with fingers that shook like autumn leaves. The trading post keeper had seen everything the frontier could offer: men broken by loss, women worn thin by hardship, children aged beyond their years by hunger. But today felt different. Today felt heavy with the kind of silence that comes before lightning strikes. The door creaked, and a man entered with measured steps. His boots were cracked leather, his shirt patched but clean. In his weathered hands, he held a small bundle wrapped in faded calico. The bundle moved, and Samuel saw it was a child, a girl no older than 8, with dark hair that caught what little light filtered through the grimy windows. "Pete," the man said, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Got business to discuss." Old Pete looked up from his counting. His rheumy eyes took in the man, then the child, then settled on the desperate way the father's hands trembled. "What kind of business?" "Jim Morrison." Jim Morrison. Samuel recognized the name from somewhere deep in memory, though he couldn't place where. The man unwrapped the child with the careful movements of someone handling something precious that he was about to lose forever. The girl stood silent, her eyes wide and dark as winter sky. She wore a blue dress with tiny white flowers scattered across the fabric like stars. The dress was too big for her small frame, the sleeves rolled up to reveal thin wrists, the hem falling past her ankles. But it was clean and carefully mended, loved despite its wear. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. The world tilted, and suddenly he was standing in another place, another time. Sarah laughing in their little cabin, spinning in that same blue dress, while morning light caught the white flowers. Sarah's hands smoothing the fabric over her growing belly, whispering to their unborn child. Sarah dying in that dress while the doctor shook his head and Samuel's world crumbled to ash. "My boy's dying," Jim Morrison was saying, though his words seemed to come from far away. "Doc in Millfield says he needs medicine from back east. Real medicine, not the snake oil they peddle here. Costs more than I got." Old Pete set down his coins. The silence stretched thin as wire. "What you asking, Jim?" Morrison's face crumpled like paper in a fire. His hands found his daughter's shoulders, and she looked up at him with trust that cut deeper than any blade. "I'm asking. I'm asking if you know anyone who might." He couldn't finish. The words died in his throat. "Daddy," the girl whispered. Her voice was soft as morning mist. Samuel watched the transaction unfold like a man witnessing his own hanging. He saw old Pete's uncomfortable shifting, heard Morrison's broken explanations about temporary arrangements and desperate times. But all he could see was that dress, those tiny white flowers that had once bloomed on Sarah's body, had once been touched by Sarah's hands. 10 cents, Morrison finally said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside. 10 cents and a rope. That's what I need for the medicine. Someone to take care of her while I get my boy well. The girl looked up at her father with eyes that understood too much. Samuel saw Sarah in those eyes, the same quiet strength, the same gentle acceptance of a world that took more than it gave. Old Pete scratched his whiskers. "Jim, you sure about this?" "There's other ways." "No," Morrison said quickly. "No other ways. Boy's burning up with fever. Won't last another week without that medicine." His voice broke. "She's a good girl. Quiet. Won't be no trouble." Samuel found himself stepping forward before his mind could stop him. His boots echoed on the wooden floor, each step bringing him closer to a decision he didn't understand. The girl turned toward him, and those dark eyes held no fear, only a sadness that matched his own. "I got 10 cents," Samuel heard himself say. His voice sounded strange in his ears, distant as thunder. "And rope." Morrison looked at him with desperate gratitude. "She's good with animals. Knows her letters. Can cook a little." Samuel held up his hand. He couldn't bear to hear the father sell his daughter like livestock. But he also couldn't walk away from that dress, from those flowers that had haunted his dreams for 3 long years. He reached into his pocket, fingers finding the coins he'd been saving for supplies. 10 cents. The price of a cup of coffee, a handful of tobacco, a moment's comfort. The price of child's life. "What's her name?" Samuel asked. "Grace," Morrison whispered. "Grace Elizabeth Morrison. Grace." The words settled in Samuel's chest like a bird finding home. He looked at the girl, at Grace, and saw her watching him with careful eyes. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there in Sarah's dress like a ghost made flesh. Samuel pulled out the coins, felt their weight in his palm. Such a small thing, 10 cents. Sarah had spent more than that on ribbons for her hair. But here now it was everything. It was hope and desperation and the strange mathematics of survival on the frontier. "The dress," he said suddenly. Morrison looked puzzled. "Where'd she get the dress?" Morrison's face softened for the first time since entering the trading post. "Her mama's. My Helen made it herself before the fever took her. Grace ain't worn nothing else since." Samuel's world lurched again. Not Sarah's dress, but another woman's love sewn into fabric. Another mother's hands cutting and stitching, creating something beautiful to wrap around her daughter. Another family broken by the frontier's endless hunger. He held out the 10 cents and saw Morrison's hand shake as he reached for it. The coins passed between them with the weight of sacrament. Old Pete produced a coil of rope, the hemp rough and honest. Grace stood perfectly still through it all, her small hands folded in front of her worn dress. She looked at her father with eyes that forgave him before he could ask. Then she looked at Samuel, and he saw something there that made his throat tight. Trust, fragile as spun glass, but real as rain. Morrison knelt before his daughter, his voice breaking as he tried to explain what couldn't be explained. Grace listened, nodded, then wrapped her thin arms around his neck in a hug that spoke of understanding beyond her years. When they parted, Morrison stood on unsteady legs. He pressed something small into Grace's palm. A wooden doll, carved rough but with love. She clutched it to her chest, and Samuel saw her composure crack for just a moment before she gathered herself again. The afternoon sun slanted through the trading post windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Morrison took a last look at his daughter, then turned and walked out into the dust and heat. The door closed behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. Grace stood in the silence, still holding her doll, still wearing her mother's dress. Samuel looked at her and felt the weight of 10 cents in his conscience, heavier than gold. He had bought a child, though he told himself it was salvation. He had paid for companionship, though he called it mercy. But looking at Grace, at those dark eyes and that flower-scattered dress, he wondered if perhaps they had both been purchased by something larger than coins and rope. Perhaps they had both been bought by the strange currency of second chances, paid for in the only coin the frontier accepted, the willingness to risk loving again what could so easily be lost. The wagon moved like a tired animal through the endless brown. Samuel kept his eyes on the horizon, watching heat waves dance where the sky touched earth. Behind him, the girl sat small and still as a carved stone. 3 days now since he pulled her from the ashes of her world, and she had not spoken once. He did not blame her. The wooden doll in her arms was burned black on one side, its painted face half melted away. She held it like it might break into dust if she loosened her grip. Samuel had seen men hold their wounds the same way, afraid to look, afraid to let go. The sun climbed higher, turning the air thick and mean. His horse's hooves found their rhythm against the hard-packed earth, each step marking time that could not be taken back. Samuel shifted on the wagon seat, leather creaking under his weight. The sound felt too loud in all that emptiness. "Water soon," he said, more to himself than to her. No, answer came from behind him. There never was. He had done terrible things in his life, things that lived in his chest like broken glass, cutting him every time he drew breath. But leaving a child alone in that burned-out settlement would have been worse than all of them combined. So he took her, not knowing what else to do with mercy that came too late. The girl's name was Rose. He learned it from a neighbor woman who survived long enough to whisper it before the fever took her. Rose Whitman, 8 years old, daughter of the schoolteacher and the blacksmith. Parents dead, brothers dead. The whole town laid waste by fever and fire, and men who should have helped but ran instead. Samuel knew about running. He had done his share. The wagon wheels turned and turned, carving shallow ruts in the dust that would be gone by morning. Everything in this country was temporary except the sky and the loneliness. He had learned that lesson young, but it took him 43 years to understand what it meant. Behind him, Rose shifted slightly. The doll's wooden head knocked against the wagon side with a soft tap. Samuel's shoulders tightened. He wanted to turn around, wanted to see if she was all right, but something told him not to. Some instinct born of too many years watching wounded things in the wild. You moved too fast, spoke too sudden, and they would bolt. Or break. The trail ahead split like a snake's tongue. Left led to Millbrook, where decent folks lived and asked questions Samuel could not answer. Right led to Copper Falls, a mining town where men minded their own business and kept their mouths shut. He pulled the reins gently right. "We'll stop at the creek," he said. "Horse needs water." Still no sound from Rose. But when he glanced back quick as a bird, he saw her eyes watching the horizon too. Dark eyes, like her mother's had been. Like all the dead eyes that followed him in dreams. The creek ran shallow and warm, more mud than water, but it would do. Samuel climbed down from the wagon, his bones protesting the movement. Getting old, he thought. Getting tired of carrying ghosts. He unhitched the horse and let it to drink. The animal's muzzle touched the water with delicate care, as if it too understood that nothing in this world could be trusted completely. Samuel filled his canteen and the water barrel, moving slow and steady. No sudden movements. No loud sounds. Rose climbed down from the wagon without being told. She stood in the shade, doll pressed against her chest, watching the water flow over stones worn smooth by time. Her dress was torn and dirty, but she held herself straight. Proud, even in ruin. That was her father's blood showing through. Samuel had known Thomas Whitman. A good man who believed in books and learning and the power of gentle words to change hard hearts. The kind of man this country needed more of and always lost first. Thomas had tried to organize the town when the fever came. Try to keep people from running, try to make them see that running would only spread the sickness faster. He died for his wisdom. "Your pa was right," Samuel said, not looking at Rose directly. "About staying together. About not running." Rose's fingers tightened on the doll. She did not speak, but her eyes found his for just a moment. In them he saw something that made his chest ache, not blame, but a question. "Why did you run? Why did you leave us?" He had no answer that would satisfy a child. Had no answer that satisfied himself. The water moved over the stones with a sound like whispered prayers. Samuel knelt and splashed his face, letting the wetness cut through dust and sweat and something deeper that could not be washed away. When he stood, Rose was closer, still clutching the doll, but closer. She was pretty, Rose said. Her voice came out cracked and small, like it had not been used in years. Samuel looked at the doll's melted face, trying to see what Rose saw. "Yes," he said. "She was. Mama made her for my birthday. Before the sickness. Your mama had good hands." Rose nodded, then looked up at him with those dark, serious eyes. "Are you taking me somewhere safe?" The question hit him like a fist to the gut. Safe. As if anywhere in this world could be called that. As if he had ever been able to keep anyone safe, including himself. "I'm taking you somewhere better," he said finally. It was the most honest answer he could give. They traveled on through the afternoon heat. The sun hung above them like a brass coin, offering light but no mercy. Samuel found himself listening for Rose's breathing, for the small sound she made when the wagon hit a rut or stone. Life sounds. Proof that he had not failed completely this time. The trail rose gradually toward a line of hills that promised cooler air, and perhaps a town where questions came gentle and people understood that some stories were too heavy to tell all at once. Samuel did not know what they would find there. Did not know if he could build something good from the pieces of two broken lives. But the wagon wheels turned, carrying them forward through the dust and heat and silence, carrying them toward whatever waited beyond the hills. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Samuel felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest like a bird testing its wings. The doll's remaining I caught the late sunlight as Rose held it close, and Samuel thought maybe broken things could still see beauty if they tried hard enough. The fire crackled small and orange against the night. Samuel had built it careful, using dry wood that would not smoke too much or burn too bright. Out here in the open country, light could draw the wrong kind of attention. But the girl needed warmth, and warmth needed flame. Rose sat across from him, the burned doll in her lap, staring into the dancing light. The fire painted shadows on her face that made her look older than 8 years. Older and sadder, like she had seen all the world's sorrow and was still trying to make sense of it. Above them, the stars spread out like salt spilled on black cloth. Samuel had always found comfort in the bigness of the night sky. It made his troubles feel smaller somehow, made him remember that pain was not forever, even when it felt that way. "My real name isn't Rose," the girl said suddenly. Samuel looked up from where he was checking his rifle. Her voice came soft but clear, like she had been practicing the words in her head for hours. "What is it then?" he asked. "Mary. Mary Catherine Whitman." She touched the doll's melted face with one finger. "Rose was my baby brother's name for me. Before he got sick." Samuel set the rifle aside. Something in her voice told him this was important, that she was giving him a piece of herself that cost her to share. "Rose is a good name," he said, "if that's what your brother called you. He died first." Mary's eyes stayed on the fire. "Before the fever got bad. Before Papa." She stopped, swallowed hard, then started again. "Papa sold me to the Trader Williams for medicine money. Said the medicine might save Jimmy, and I was old enough to take care of myself." The words hit Samuel like stones thrown at glass. He felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been barely holding together since the day he rode out of her town, with dust on his boots and shame in his heart. "The medicine didn't work," Mary continued. "Jimmy died anyway. And Papa, he wouldn't look at me after. Like I was something dirty. Like it was my fault somehow." Samuel stared into the fire, watching flames lick at the dry wood. He remembered the day he left Millbrook. Remembered Thomas Whitman begging him to stay, to help organize the survivors, to use his knowledge of medicine and healing to fight the fever that was eating their town alive. He remembered riding away instead. "Your father was a good man," Samuel said finally. "Good men sometimes do bad things when they're scared." "Were you scared?" Mary asked. "When you left us?" The question came simple and direct, the way children asked hard things without understanding how much they cut. Samuel felt his throat tighten. In all his years, no one had ever asked him that. No one had ever wanted to know the truth about his running. "Yes," he said. "I was scared. Of the fever, of failing." The words came out harder than he meant them to. Of watching more people die and not being able to stop it. Mary nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Children saw things clear sometimes, without all the lies grown folks told themselves to sleep at night. "My wife died of fever too," Samuel said. He had not meant to tell her that. Had not meant to tell anyone, ever. But the fire was warm and the night was big, and somehow the words wanted to come out. "2 years before your town got sick. Her name was Catherine, same as yours. She died wearing her blue Sunday dress because she wanted to look pretty when she went to meet God." The memory rose up in him like smoke from green wood, thick and choking. Catherine lying in their bed, fever burning her up from the inside. Her hand in his, so small and hot it felt like holding a coal from the fire. "She asked me to find the light again," Samuel said. Those were her last words. "Find the light, Samuel. Don't let the darkness win." Mary looked at him across the fire. Her dark eyes reflected the flames, making them look like tiny stars. Did you find it? No. The word came out like a confession. I ran instead. Ran from town to town, trying to help people with fevers and sickness. But every time someone died, I ran again. Like death was chasing me, and I could outrun it if I rode fast enough. But you came back for me. Too late. But you came. Samuel looked at this small girl who held broken toys and carried wounds too big for her body. She was right, and he had not seen it until now. He had come back. Not in time to save her family. Not in time to stop the traitor Williams from buying and selling children like they were livestock. But he had come. Your papa made a mistake selling you, Samuel said. But he wasn't evil. He was just broken, and broken people do desperate things. Mary picked up her doll and smoothed its remaining hair. Do you think he loved me? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Samuel remembered Thomas Whitman's "Face the day the fever started spreading." The way the man's eyes had lit up when he talked about his children, about the future he wanted to build for them in that small town. Yes, Samuel said. I think he loved you more than his own life. I think selling you near killed him, and I think he died with your name on his lips. Tears started in Mary's eyes, but she did not look away from him. Do you think he's sorry? I think he's been sorry every minute since. They sat quiet for a while, watching the fire burn down to coals. An owl called somewhere in the darkness, and the wind moved through the grass with a sound like whispered prayers. The night felt different now, less empty, like the space between them had filled with something that was not quite friendship, but was no longer silence. I used to think God was punishing me, Mary said, for something I did wrong. What do you think now? I think maybe God sent you to find me. Samuel felt his chest tighten. He was not the kind of man God sent anywhere. He was the kind of man who ran when running was the worst thing he could do. But looking at Mary across the dying fire, seeing the way she held herself straight despite everything that had been taken from her, he wondered if maybe broken things could still be used for good purposes. Maybe he did, Samuel said. The coals glowed red in the darkness, holding on to their warmth like small hearts still beating. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, marking time that moved too slow for the living and too fast for the dying. Mary curled up on her blanket, the doll tucked against her chest. Samuel added one more piece of wood to the fire, enough to keep them warm until morning. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack, and the sound carried all the loneliness of the wide country. But here by the fire, two broken souls had found something that might have been the beginning of healing. And tomorrow, when the sun came up to light their way forward, they would not be traveling alone anymore. The morning came gray and cool, with mist hanging low over the creek like the breath of sleeping ghosts. Samuel woke before Mary, as was his way. Years of trail life had taught him to rise with the first pale light, when the world was quiet and a man could think without the noise of living getting in the way. He lay on his blanket, watching the sky lighten by degrees, and felt the weight of 10 cents in his vest pocket. 10 cents. The price Williams had paid him for bringing Mary back when her time with the traitor was done. 10 cents to return a child to a father who had sold her for medicine that never came. It seemed like nothing and everything at once. Mary slept curled tight around her doll, both of them small bundles of hurt wrapped in worn cloth. In the gray light, she looked even younger than her 8 years. She looked like what she was, a child who had seen too much darkness and was still hoping for dawn. Samuel sat up slow, joints protesting the cold ground. His horse stood nearby, breath steaming in the morning air, waiting patient as an old friend. The animal knew the routine. Up before the sun, pack the camp, ride toward whatever waited ahead. But today felt different. Today the routine felt like a choice instead of just habit. He could load Mary in the wagon and drive back toward Millbrook. Could find what was left of her family and hand her over with the 10 cents, clean and simple. Williams would pay him the rest of his fee, and he could ride on to the next town, the next job, the next empty room where he would sleep alone with his ghosts. Or he could choose the other path. The fire had burned down to cold ashes, but Samuel could still feel the warmth of last night's words between them. Mary had trusted him with her real name, her real story, had looked at him across those flames and asked if he thought her father loved her. The question had cut him deeper than any knife, because he knew the answer was yes, and he knew love sometimes made men do terrible things. Mary stirred, then sat up sudden like a startled bird. Her eyes found his right away, wide and worried. "You're still here," she said. "Where would I go?" She relaxed a little, but her grip on the doll stayed tight. "I dreamed you left me by the creek. Just rode away while I was sleeping." Samuel felt that familiar twist in his chest, the one that came whenever someone expected him to disappoint them. He had earned that expectation, had spent years proving he was the kind of man who left when staying got hard. "I'm not leaving," he said. "Not without talking to you first." Mary nodded, then climbed to her feet and walked to the creek to splash water on her face. She moved careful, like someone who had learned not to take up too much space in the world. It broke Samuel's heart to watch. When she came back, he had coffee boiling over a small fire and bacon sizzling in the pan. Simple food, but hot and filling. The kind of breakfast that said someone cared enough to make sure you ate. "Mary," he said as she settled beside him, "I need to tell you something." Her whole body went still. Children learned early that grown folks only started conversations that way when bad news was coming. "Williams paid me to bring you back to your father. When you were done working for him. That's how I knew where to find you." Mary stared into the fire, her face carved from stone. "How much?" 10 cents now. 90 cents when I bring you home." "That's all I'm worth?" $1. The pain in her voice near killed him. "That's not what you're worth. That's just what broken men are willing to pay." She was quiet for a long time, turning her doll over and over in her small hands. The toys remaining, I caught the firelight, looking for all the world like it was trying to wink. "Are you taking me back?" she asked finally. "That's what I need to talk to you about." Samuel poured coffee into his tin cup, more to buy time than because he wanted it. The words he needed were there in his chest, but getting them from his heart to his mouth felt like pushing rocks uphill. "I could take you back," he said. "Could give you to your father and collect my money and ride on like nothing happened." That's what the old Samuel would do. The one who ran from everything that mattered. But I don't want to be that man anymore." Mary looked at him, then really looked like she was trying to see something hidden behind his eyes. "What do you want to be?" The question hung between them like smoke from the fire. What did he want to be? For 2 years since Catherine died, he had not let himself want anything except to keep moving, keep running, keep the pain at bay. But sitting here with this small girl who had been sold and abandoned and was still brave enough to trust him, he felt something stirring that might have been hope. "I want to be someone who stays," he said. "Someone who builds something instead of running away from it." "Like what?" "Like a family." The words came out simple and plain, but they carried the weight of everything he had lost and everything he might still find. Mary's eyes went wide, like he had offered her the moon. "You mean it?" she whispered. "I mean it. But what about my papa? What about going home?" Samuel had thought about this during the long watches of the night, had turned it over in his mind like a man examining a stone for cracks. "Your papa sold you because he was desperate and scared and thought it might save your brother. But Jimmy's gone now, and your papa, he's probably eating himself alive with guilt. Seeing you would just remind him of what he did." Mary's lower lip trembled. "He doesn't want me back. It's not that he doesn't want you. It's that he can't forgive himself for letting you go. And until he can do that, you'll always be the living reminder of his worst moment. So I don't have anywhere to go. You have me." The words sat between them like a bridge neither of them was sure would hold their weight. Samuel reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the 10 cents Williams had paid him. The coins felt heavy as lead in his palm. "This money," he said, "it's not yours. It's not mine either. It's just the price men put on things when they're too scared or too broken to see what really matters." He tossed the coins into the fire. They landed in the coals with tiny hisses, the metal blackening in the heat. Mary stared at the coins as they disappeared into the flames. "That was your money. That was my past," Samuel said. "I'd rather spend my time building a future." She was quiet for so long he started to worry he had said too much, offered too much, scared her with the bigness of what he was suggesting. But then she scooted closer to him on the log they shared, close enough that he could feel the warmth from her small body. "I don't know how to be someone's family," she said. "Neither do I," Samuel admitted. "But maybe we can learn together." Mary looked down at her doll, at the melted face and singed hair that spoke of all the beauty the fire had taken. Then she looked up at Samuel with those dark eyes that had seen too much sorrow for someone so young. "Will you teach me to ride a horse?" she asked. "If you want. And to shoot straight? When you're older? And to make coffee that doesn't taste like mud?" Samuel laughed, the sound surprising them both. It had been so long since laughter lived in his chest that he had almost forgotten what it felt like. "Especially that," he said. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist and painting the world in shades of gold and green. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its liquid song, and the creek whispered its ancient secrets to the stones. Samuel looked at Mary, really looked at her, not as a job to be finished or a problem to be solved, but as a person who had chosen to trust him with her broken heart and her uncertain future. And for the first time since Catherine died, he felt like he might be exactly where he was supposed to be. But being where you're supposed to be and knowing what to do next are two different things entirely, and the road ahead stretched long and uncertain as a prayer spoken into the wind.